Good afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNC Radio.live, where we offer the traffic, weather, news, sports, and entertainment our commercial drivers want and need. Nobody is more affected by the supply chain than people in transportation. Information is one thing we like to provide our drivers. Despite a slight rebound from the chaos created during the pandemic, it still seems that the supply chain is in a state of flux. The Wall Street Journal recently issued an article on how supply chains upended by COVID are back to normal. Lisa Anderson maintains there's no such thing as normal with the supply chain. Lisa Anderson is an expert in this area. She's president of LMA Consulting Group, and she says customer expectations have changed. They want shorter lead times, more flexibility with modifications, and greater consistency. We wanted her latest take on what's happening with the supply chain, so we invited her back on the show. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
I thought before we begin, maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am a supply chain management expert and consultant. I work with manufacturers and distributors and, in essence, help them better navigate the situations we've been dealing with for the last few years. So how do you have the right inventory in the right place at the right time and make money doing so and have cash available to invest further?
I've heard a lot, Lisa, in the last several months about a lot of companies that are moving manufacturing either back into the States or nearshoring or friend-shoring. I heard that term recently for the first time. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yes, absolutely. There is a lot of interest in reshoring and nearshoring. Friendly shoring, it's also called. But, really there's actually a lot of interest in moving production back to the U.S. That implies it's gone somewhere else. But generally speaking, moving it closer to where customers are located, which there's a lot of customers in the U.S. and there's a lot of risk throughout the world.
There is. It's a weird world right now with balloons and whatever else they're out there floating around, and it just seems like and the war, of course, it continues on. When we spoke to you a year ago, that hadn't quite happened yet.
Right. Absolutely. That is really the main one of the strategies that the most successful clients are following are to get ahead of what's coming, which is not easy because you have to be thinking about what's ahead, what's likely to happen, and figure out how to position yourself in a way that's resilient, but also forward-looking. And so because of that, many of them are moving back to closer to where their customers are, which implies, the U.S., Mexico, and, some Latin American countries as well as from a manufacturing standpoint. But really from a scale point of view, meaning like China has a lot of volume. So you don't repeat that by putting, 10 pieces here, 10 pieces there. It's just not going to work. So the U.S. has scale and Mexico has some scale as well. So that's where the bulk of it is going.
So what you do then as part of your day-to-day work life, do you advise companies? Do they sit down with you and say, okay, here's what we're doing everything right now, here's our concerns, and so you advise them, okay, you got to bring manufacturing to this spot, or what? Tell me a little bit more about what it is that you do.
Sure. So actually, I just published a book. I don't know if you were leading in that direction, but I published a book, Sales, Inventory, and Operations Planning. And it's really described where I focus, which is you have to start with your demand. So who are your customers for the future? What are they? What are they going to be ordering? And what type of based upon your future volumes, what kind of capabilities do you need? So, I don't know. You may need, I have a client right now, they have some manufacturing in the Midwest, and but that does not sufficiently meet all of their, growth needs. So they're also offloading additional volumes to other manufacturers, if you will. It's the same thing could happen with an Asia idea. So you have, how do you best fulfill that sales volume? And it's the sales volume you want to target, not necessarily those customers that you don't make any money on that, are not growth anyway. So what I'm seeing is we look at what are they going to sell? How do we price, perhaps, to make, you have many levers between pricing, capacity, where you produce something, who your suppliers are. So you can, one, fulfill your top customers' needs, and two, how do you do that profitably? And then three is how do you do that with the best working capital position, which means you have the least amount of inventory tied up unnecessarily. Right. But these days you have to add into the equation risk as well.
Yeah, it seems like people have been stuck with a lot of inventory they can't move now.
Correct. So, with this equation, it's never perfect to get a picture of what you're going to sell in the future, but it's a process. So it's like the SIOP process is generally speaking monthly, but you really have weekly interactions. So you have to be on top of changing conditions. And then from there, to your point, you have to constantly adjust and you're tweaking. You don't make versus buy decisions, which is perhaps an insourcing one, but you also can insource or reshore to a supplier. You don't have to necessarily do it in-house. So there's a lot of options, and all of those types of decisions flow through this monthly process so that you can stay in front of changing conditions in the marketplace and set yourself up so that you can take advantage of opportunities and avoid, all these pitfalls. With that said, there's an enormous amount of risk today. So you may have to, bring on some extra inventory, like you're saying. But the key is you don't want to do it across the board because then you'll run out of money. So it's which inventory should you bring in to avoid risk.
With the increasing tension that there seems to be between the U.S. and China, do you see a lot of the production that's being done over there move to our shores? That would certainly have a negative impact for China, but it would be actually a win-win for producers here.
Yeah, it definitely would in our economy as well, because manufacturing jobs create quite a few more, jobs throughout the supply chain. Well, what I'm really seeing is that value add manufacturers. So what I mean by that is if it's like a manufacturer of toys that, are lightweight and small, so you can ship them easily, and they don't have a high labor component. Or I should say, if they do have a high labor component, meaning like you need several workers to put them together manually, then those I'm seeing offloaded to other countries in Asia, hopefully ones that we have a friendlier relationship with, possibly India, or Latin America. But if you can offload it and you can automate and digitize, there's robotics. There's a lot of ways where you can minimize the labor content. And if it's bulky to ship, by all means, those are coming back. Those are the priorities, I should say, to reshore. In addition to, most importantly, critical to national security type items like, well, if you just think about the things we really have to have, like food, medications, medical devices, those are really quite important.
Did some of this push start after all of the delays at the ports?
Yes, for sure. People used to think, or executives used to think, well, things will carry on like they have been. I mean, it was a normal assumption because after all, it had been working that way for a long time. So although they did risk assessments in some of my clients, for example, they really didn't look at the risk the same way. They thought, well, this risk is, maybe we'll carry a little bit more inventory, but they really didn't have a thorough risk assessment. So the pandemic proved pretty quickly that supply chains will become really disrupted if they're far away. If you have, during the pandemic, they only had zero COVID policies in China, and they just stopped production. And of course, they'll stop production on the items that are least important to them. Mm-hmm. So like they'll prioritize their production. So that shows you the unfriendly, if you will, or, the risk component. So the executives quickly found out that there was too much risk and they couldn't supply their customers with what they needed.
It certainly blindsided a lot of people, I think, especially with the pandemic and everything. I'd like to unpack more of this, but I know that we have to go to break. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. She's president of LMA Consulting Group. We're talking about the supply chain and what's happening. Stay tuned for more coming up.
This infoblog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. ISS score for truck drivers explained and how to find it. An inspection selection system score is called ISS score, was created by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, to help law enforcement officers determine if the truck should be inspected. The inspection selection system score is frequently used to determine if your truck will receive a bypass command or not. There is often confusion between the ISS score and the CSA score. While there's a correlation between the two, they're not the same thing. The CSA score identifies high-risk motor carriers. The score is based on the performance data of the driver. The ISS score uses a combination of different CSA categories known as Behavior Analysis and Safety Improvement Category. That's basics for short, to determine the carrier's overall inspection rating from 0 to 100. Similar to the CSA score, the lower, the better. What determines your ISS inspection value? Unsafe driving, hours of service, HOS, driver fitness, controlled substances and alcohol, vehicle maintenance and cargo, hazardous material. There are 3 different ISS ratings categories: inspect, optional, or pass. Inspect, 75 to 100. Optional, 50 to 74. Pass, 1 to 49. ISS scores can determine how often you'll get inspected. Although some roadside inspections are at random times, most will be as a result of a higher ISS score. How to find ISS score. The FMCSA has an online portal where carriers can log in to check their ISS scores. You'll log in using your DOT-issued PIN. From there, you'll see the company information section on the main screen. Next, click the blue button labeled Inspection Selection System Info. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Catch Mind Your Trucking Business Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern with James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly. They provide expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking business. It's Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. She's president of LMA Consulting Group. We're talking about the supply chain. Lisa, what is influencing the supply chain instability today? Who essentially is the elephant in the room, and what's causing most of the chaos and uncertainty?
Well, actually, it's a wide variety of things, which is, I guess, typical for supply chains. So, as you mentioned earlier, the Russia-Ukraine war is still impacting the supply chain. There are some key materials, food type items, fertilizer, and other things that come from that region, in addition to, of course, the oil and natural gas issues, which by no means are limited to just oil and gas, because those are used in many, many other products. But that's just Russia and Ukraine. Then there's the China. China is probably the bigger issue at the moment. Well, I mean, they're all issues, but it's the more surprising one in the sense that we had zero COVID policies for, much of 2022, which really created disruption. And then now we have these Chinese balloons and sanctions that, could affect some of the companies that, we've been working with. And then, of course, we have folks reshoring. So there's a lot of risk when it comes to China, but it's not just world politics, if you will. There's other issues like we averted the rail strike that was coming our way previously. However, they're still negotiating, for example, to avoid a strike at the ports of LA and Long Beach, which is, the major ports. Typically 40% of the products come in through those ports. I mean, they have no expectation that a strike's going to happen, but customers have become risk adverse. And so they've started sending products through to the East Coast. And so it's changed. Anytime the supply chain changes, it causes additional disruptions because things aren't as they traditionally have become. So that's that. There's weather events. I mean, so unfortunately, the good news and the bad news is it's not one thing, it's everything.
The recent derailments, there was one that just happened today in Michigan, outside of Detroit. Is that going to influence how people ship things too?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, even if it's as simple as, the train derailed, and obviously there's a cleanup going on, that will, there's going to be trains and trucks diverted. There'll be extra attention in certain areas. So anything that impacts, traffic patterns, rail, air, any of the above can easily impact supply chain. But also, to your point, it's not just in what happens directly because of it. It's also people's perception. So if, for example, like the worry over the strikes at the LA and Long Beach ports, which are probably unlikely to happen, but the worry about that has moved volume to the other ports. The worry about, rail, derailments, which is strange that they seem to be popping up now suddenly, easily can move people to shipping by air or by truck, or some other fashion, which is going to create further disruptions because we were talking about forecasting demand. Well, that changes the demand for the different modes of operation.
Sure. How much is moved by truck? Do you know what the percentages are? Or?
That's a really good question. I would have to look it up. I mean, it's substantial, but, I think it depends on how you look at it. It's, is it by dollars? Is it by, the space on like truck versus rail, if you will? What I can tell you is that when they were looking at averting the rail strike, just like sending one day's worth of rail shipments by truck was like far more trucks than we have available. I'd have to look up the statistic. Maybe I'll do that on the next break, but it was substantial because rail is obviously bulky, generally speaking. And so it's much more difficult to send it by trucks. Obviously, in this case, it's an opportunity for increased volume when it comes to trucking.
So some of these fluctuations could be considered opportunities for people in the transportation industry if they are savvy enough to make the right move.
Absolutely. It really is. I mean, most successful companies, if you look back over their history, they took advantage of some opportunity along the way. The innovation is one of the sources of innovation is actually just seeing an opportunity and developing something to meet that need. So right now, it's actually, you bring up a really good point because these derailments are causing a lot of concern, to say the least. So, the trucking company or the trucker that says, hey, if you're interested in avoiding risk, I have reliable service to, depends, certain lanes or whatever, you could easily attract additional volume. There's, I have no doubt, even with a price increase, because people are more concerned about getting product on time, because all of the manufacturers I work with, for example, are still struggling really to get materials coming consistently when they're supposed to and with lead times that they can count on.
Are people buying more online now? I think that the way people purchase things during the pandemic really changed with all the shutdowns. Are they still buying more online? I know that we see Amazon has laid people off, but I know I buy more online than I did before the pandemic.
For sure. I recently researched that for an article I was writing. Definitely the percentage that folks buy online has increased. The pandemic, made it progress something like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years in one, or probably 1 month. Yeah. But basically, it spiked up. Now, since the pandemic has calmed down, if you will, folks are going back out as well. But the percentage that they're buying online has not gone down. It's just that it's not increasing at the same kind of a rate.
So retailers have to be really, they have to kind of anticipate what their customers are going to do. How much are they going to have an inventory in their retail store, their brick and mortar operation versus online? They've got to really diversify. That's really changed the way they plan, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. If really retailers, if they want to be successful, they have to have an advantage over online purchases. And that's difficult because, Amazon's made it very simple. You can have easy returns, it's fast. So that's hard to beat. So really the idea there is that they need to have an advantage, and that really sticks to having the right products, in quotes, of course, but the right products at the stores so that folks have a reason to want to go there, and they have to stick out in service. So even if they have, I don't know, most of the products, they can make sure that somebody helps them order what they don't have and they get it delivered quickly. So it's a combination.
You've maintained that there's no such thing as normal with the supply chain. And of course, the Wall Street Journal had said that the supply chains since COVID are back to normal. Is this a new normal, or will there ever be equilibrium again?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the new normal, if you will, is continued disruptions. It really does not, at least for the next decade. And I could foresee farther than that. But it seems as though, we have one crises after another. They don't always have to be a crisis. It could be an opportunity, but we have a lot of shifts going on currently, because even if we didn't have all these global conflicts, if you will, we have a very, we have the great, what do you call it? The Great Resignation, but really it's more about baby boomers retiring, which you're probably thinking, why am I bringing that up? But it basically affects everything, because there's a lot of experience that's leaving the workforce, and it's creating more disruption, because after all, if you don't know how things ran smoothly because it wasn't, documented, automated, built into the daily routine, it's going to be quite the challenge.
I think a lot of baby boomers, with the stress of the pandemic, just said, you know what, I'm retiring early. This is nuts.
I think you're right. I know several that have done that, and I think that it's quite obvious in working with the companies that I work with that it's just not a no-brainer to replace them, especially during times of disruption. I mean, when everything is pretty much going according to plan, it's relatively easy to get somebody into a position and functioning. But when things go awry, how do you handle that? That's something that experience is either there to handle, or the best companies, of course, prepare for these things. They're agile. That's why they'll have a more likely opportunity to grow their volume in the future.
Well, when everything hits the fan, so to speak, it seems like that's when you want the experienced person versus the neophyte or the person who just came on the job and has no idea what to do.
Definitely, you're right. Because I can tell you that working with clients, that what could take even us as outsiders to a company, what we could solve in 10 minutes sometimes, what could take them months, literally months, because they just don't know where to look. I mean, it's not as though they could be really good and have great potential. They just don't know what they don't know yet. So, it's the mentoring time, if you will, as well, to get somebody to the point of where they can handle that better.
Sure. So that can add to the instability in the supply chain as well. Oh my goodness. We've got a lot of different obstacles that we have to, or hurdles to jump, if you will. There are a lot of things to discuss. We do have to go to break here, Lisa. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There are several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now, here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
This is Heath Sanders, and you're listening to TNCRadio.live.
You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. She's president of LMA Consulting Group. Lisa, you said you have the percentage of how much freight is hauled by truck.
Yes, it's about 72% is by weight is hauled by truck. So it's pretty absolutely substantial.
That's huge. So trucking plays a huge role in our economy. Tom, you said you had a question for Lisa regarding, I think, the economy?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about that stat for a minute. And okay, so somebody would say, no, it's got to be more weight by train. But remember, it's not like the train pulls up to the warehouse most places. Most places, it still has to get unloaded off the train and put
on a truck
to get to where it's going. So, yeah, maybe trains carry more weight. What one train carries the weight of 250 trucks or something like that. But in the long run, though, it still has to end up on the truck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
True.
Yeah, I was just trying to think through that for a second. So, Lisa, we had Harry Dent on last week. Are you familiar with Harry?
Yep, I am.
Yeah, he was on last week and found him fascinating and very, very interesting. Kind of a doom and gloom guy, but to his point is he's not. He's a facts guy, and what he's saying is throughout the history of the world, in any economy you look at, you got to go up and down. It's just part of the process. He's not saying anybody's done anything wrong or that anybody can stop it or anything. It's just part of the way things go. And based on his math and the things he's been studying, he's pretty convinced we are headed into some dark times over the course of the next 18, 24, maybe 36 months. So question one is, do you agree? And question two is, if you do at any level agree with that, what's a company to do, who's part of the supply chain, what should they be concentrating on if we're headed into dark times?
Well, so I think that could be a worst case scenario. With that said, I believe that there are opportunities. Actually, in any dark times, more opportunities come out of those dark times than at any other time in history. So, like, for example, during the Great Depression, there was more companies that skyrocketed to the top of their market or industry or whatnot than at any other time in history. So the key here is there is a lot of risk. And so it very much depends. I mean, it's a tricky situation we're in because we don't have the same number of people in the workforce we did pre-pandemic. So we are still struggling to find people across the board, generally speaking. With that said, we're raising interest rates in order to increase the unemployment rates, which is difficult to do because we don't have enough people in the first place. And that, of course, causes issues with certain industries like building products. So that's quite challenging. So those are, things that would lend to what Harry is saying. On the other hand, there is a lot of still pent up, there's a lot of money in the economy still. So from that point of view, people are still spending. But there's a lot of risk out there. There's Chinese balloons we've been talking about and those kinds of things. So it's really, I think it's a situation that none of the economists have ever been in before. So it's a difficult one to predict. But the good news is that what I am quite sure is going to happen is that there will be challenges along the way because we know we have many risks out there between the Russia-Ukraine war, the Chinese spy balloons, and the Great Resignation that's going on. There's train derailments and a host of other topics. So as these disruptions happen, it will certainly cause issues along the way. And the companies that are proactive, forward-thinking, in touch with their key customers, what their key customers need, and are functioning in a way that is resilient so that they're changing on the fly to meet changing needs, and they're understanding as those needs change, which is none of this is easy. And then they're looking at, how do I best fill capacity? They're most likely reshoring, or and or, automating, digitizing, finding ways to reduce costs while they can be closer to their customers and be successful. So the ones that are smart that way are going to have more opportunities than they know what to do with, because we still need products overall. There will still be the Gen X, I think it is, or, the younger generations are starting to look at getting housing. So they still need housing. It just needs to be a bit more affordable. And so there's going to be opportunities. That's just one example. And so the companies that are positioned to meet those needs when they come up in a rational lead time, and they can do it cost effectively because they've pre-positioned and invested ahead of time, which is the tricky part, they will have, the volume, they'll have more volume than they know what to do with, is what I think. But on the other hand, the companies that are like, well, let's wait and see what happens, and then we'll think about what we can do, and we're going to cut back in the meantime, they are likely to not be able to meet customers' needs, and they're likely to follow the Harry Dent story. So I think there's going to be a story of two tales here, like the ones that are resilient. And I don't mean investing when they even though they're doing two things at once, they're positioning themselves for growth while they are reducing costs in things that are not necessary for their target customers. And they are being careful about which inventory they're storing, so they have cash available to invest. So it's a tricky matter. It means that you have to have the right talent and the right support to make it happen.
Makes sense. So a wise trucking company can make this into a major opportunity.
Oh, for sure, especially in trucking, because as we all know, there's a lot of people who are thinking about retiring in the trucking industry, or that have already started retiring. And so, if there's one thing that's for certain is that if it's an item that's going to get to your house or get to a store, it probably has to go via a truck somewhere along the way. It would be hard to imagine, like you said, in some cases, like a manufacturer may have a rail, like they might be able to receive items by rail, but it's just not going to happen. It's not going to get to you. So everything needs to go by a truck one way or another. Mm-hmm. And so truckers are not going to, the need is not going to go away. And so if you're prepared for being resilient, looking forward, I think you'll have more opportunities than maybe you know what to do with. You can pick and choose, which would be a good place to be.
So there'll be some job security there. That's a good thing. I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, Tom. I just kind of jumped in.
No. No, you didn't. My question really, Lisa, and this may not be fair to ask with just 1 minute left before we go to break, but so we may answer this in a minute. But as you look out there, and you've been studying this stuff far more than just about anybody, what right now, as you look across world events and those kinds of things, what scares you the most? What gives you the most pause of that would be a worst case scenario? Is it war? Is it the collapse of the dollar? Is there something out there that you're looking at thinking, yeah, that would be really bad?
Well, it really is related to China. Like my worst case scenario is that we aren't looking at what's really happening, and we're not preparing and I mean this now more as like a country, and because it's going to require more than just like one business owner to deal with. But basically we don't really fully see what's happening, and that can create like problems for years to come. That'd be my biggest worry.
Do you think we could end up in a war with China? Just your personal opinion. I know you're not a military expert. But
they're changing the way they talk, like what they mean by war these days, to some degree, for sure. If you think about it, because you can have a war in terms of like financially, like they own some of our debt, a lot of our debt, really.
Oh, yeah.
We have there's a massive amount of challenges that have nothing to do with shooting at each other.
Sure. I guess you could make a case that we already are.
Well, yes,
at war to
kind of.
level.
I mean, after all, they sent a spy balloon our way, and they are producing a lot of the ingredients for medications. There's a lot of essential items that we still have not made quick enough progress at.
I think all of our essential antibiotics are made in China.
Is that right?
It's horrifying, yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. It's and I've never quite understood that. If you've got things that are needed for people's health and that sort of thing, that should actually be considered an essential and come under national security because people need that so they don't die of an infection, that sort of thing. I think even cardiovascular drugs, a lot of them are made in China, too.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. And certainly the main ingredients or active ingredient, I don't know all the right terms, but a lot of those come from China and or India, but China is definitely big.
Wow.
Offshoring. Sometimes in those cases, it's better to have it produced domestically, I think. But that's just my opinion. I'm not an expert in that area. We do have to go to break here, Lisa. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. Stay tuned for more great information coming up.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Quick and healthy meals for truckers. Life on the road can make it challenging for truckers to find a healthy meal. Truckers are on the go and sometimes on a strict time frame to get their loads delivered on time. Stopping at a truck stop for fast food sounds like the most convenient option. Although it may be more convenient, eating unhealthy gas station food can take a toll on one's health. Plus, it can be more expensive. Stopping at a grocery store and picking up healthy foods can benefit truckers in many ways. Eating healthy improves mood, health, and well-being. Consider investing in appliances like a cooler, slow cooker, lunchbox, or a microwave. This will make eating healthy on the road much easier. Breakfast. The most important meal of the day, especially for truckers. Eating a good breakfast helps keep your energy up. Oatmeal is a quick and easy healthy breakfast. You can make it in under 3 minutes, and it's easy to store in your cabin. Tip: adding some fresh fruits and nuts in your oatmeal can make it even more delicious. Yogurt makes a great breakfast. It's high in protein and can keep you full for a long time. Try adding some fruits, nuts, and honey. Toast and peanut butter. You'll need a toaster or a toaster oven for this one. Peanut butter contains high levels of protein, fiber, and healthy fats. It also gives you endless energy. Protein bars are the quickest breakfast option. It's safe to eat while driving. If you're in a hurry, protein bars will make a great breakfast. Lunch. It can be very tempting to pull over and stop at your favorite restaurant. Lunchtime's a great opportunity to make healthier choices. Some favorite healthy lunch meals are the bento box lunch with loads of healthy, clean foods. It's quick and easy, too. Burrito bowls are full of fresh veggies and just take 10 minutes to make. Ham sandwich, a classic, easy lunch. Chicken salad takes about 30 minutes to prepare, but it's well worth it. Serve it on lettuce or any type of bread you like. Dinner? This is where a slow cooker will definitely come in handy. Honey garlic chicken and veggies is the easiest one-pot recipe ever. Hardly takes any effort at all. Beef stew makes a great dinner. You can enjoy it all year round. Whole roasted chicken in your slow cooker's a recipe every trucker should try. It's delicious and can keep you fed for a couple of days. Ground beef and potatoes are amazing and will only take you about 15 minutes to prepare. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Ready for the power of positive and something that will put you back to a time you wanted to last forever? Music is the ultimate time machine. What was your favorite time? Do you want to go back there? LTD Radio features the songs of the 70s, 80s, and 90s that will transport you to a happier time. It'll make you smile and brighten your day. We could all use that about now. TNCRadio.live is proud to carry the great music of LTD Radio. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. She's president of LMA Consulting Group. Lisa, it seems like uncertainty seems to be some of the biggest things I'm hearing from drivers when I hear them on talk shows. I believe there's a fair amount of alarm, especially since the spy balloons that have traversed our country. There seems to be just kind of an uncertain public perception. And I'm wondering if that could influence the supply chain because of all of this uneasiness.
Yep, I believe we're in this area of what's called VUCA. So that's VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So to your point, uncertainty is probably going to remain high for the next couple of years. But there is something we can do about it. I mean, it's going to affect the supply chain because if you're like, for example, if you're uncertain, if you can get what you need from China on time, like to support your customers, your options are somewhat limited. You can increase the amount of inventory you store so that you can better meet their needs, which is difficult because as with rising interest rates, you're going to pay more for that inventory.
Sure.
And it doesn't solve the whole problem. Or you can maybe ship it via air, which is also really expensive. So there's less options. But if you are uncertain, you can start doing things like building backup capacity or reshoring so that you can be in more control. Definitely clients are taking control of their supply chain. That doesn't mean that they have to do everything in-house, but it means they're taking control of the process and making sure that they have more of a closer partnership to their suppliers of at least their key products or the items that they need to supply to their key customers. So they're definitely taking control and building more resilience into their supply chain to deal with this uncertainty. But if you do it in the bad way, it definitely will result in more inventory and most likely inventory in the wrong products, because after all, if there's something that's uncertain, it's what's going to be sold in the future.
Oh, sure. Human beings are very, very unpredictable. You never know what they're going to decide, what they want to buy. So you've got that element in there too.
That's for sure.
Now, Lisa, I understand you have a new book that you've published. Where can people find that? And what's the title of the book?
All right. So it is called SIOP, and it also stands for Sales, Inventory, Operations Planning. And it has a subtitle, Creating Predictable Revenue and EBITDA Growth. So basically profitability. So if you just Google for SIOP for PSYOP and Lisa Anderson, you will find it. But it is available on Amazon in both a printed version and a ebook for Kindle. And it's also available on iTunes. And I also have it available on my website, which you can have do a free download. And that's at LMA-consulting group, all one word, .com/PSYOP. So SIOP dash book.
Excellent. And you said you also have an audiobook. It's a previous book you've written as well.
I will look at turning this one into an audiobook as well. However, I have an audiobook for my book called Future Proofing Manufacturing and Supply Chain Post-COVID-19, which is absolutely still applicable. And that's available for an audiobook on Amazon.
Excellent. And this definitely applies to the transportation industry. People need to know what's happening, so how they can plan. And I mean, there's so many variabilities right now with the trucking industry, especially with the push to electric trucks and everything else.
I asked you the pessimism question. Let me ask you the reverse question now. What are you most optimistic about? What do you look at over the course of the next couple of years and go, here's some really good stuff that I see happening?
Well, I actually really do see that, even in the worst case scenario from this total economy standpoint, there will be more opportunity in the next few years for those companies that are forward looking, that are resilient, and that are thinking about the future and willing to make, a few small investments, in their future. I believe there's going to be more opportunity than at any other time in probably most of our lifetimes. The only time, like I said, that would have any comparison would be the Great Depression. But there's going to be a lot of opportunity where you can set, your company or your life. It depends. So there's opportunity, from financially picking the right things to invest in, and we could go on and on. But I believe there'll be more opportunities than ever before. You just have to stay in touch with what's happening and what folks see coming, so that you can position yourself to take advantage of those opportunities.
Makes sense. Plan ahead. Foresight is much better than hindsight.
That's right. And it's certainly more optimistic.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. What is your website again, Lisa?
It's LMA and then hyphen consulting group, which is all one word, .com.
And you consult with people. If somebody called from a trucking company and said, hey, can I pick your brain? Do you do that?
I do. I work mainly with manufacturers and distributors, but I also work with individuals, trucking company owners, folks who I have some programs for, like coaching and advisory. So absolutely.
Super important. Absolutely. It feels like we're in an unprecedented time, and having somebody with wisdom and sage like you makes people feel better too.
That's true. It does help a lot to have, really half the battle is being able to forge a path forward instead of being paralyzed with fear of what's coming.
And information is power, so that you can make an educated decision, because no one can really predict the future. You look at all of the different information and analytics, but nobody saw the pandemic coming and all of the chaos with that. So it's
that
been
is
kind
true.
of a rocky ride. Yeah. I really appreciate your information here, Lisa. You have been a wonderful guest and very helpful to all of our drivers and owner-operators and the trucking companies. This is great.
Actually, I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. We've been talking with manufacturing and supply chain expert Lisa Anderson. She's president of LMA Consulting Group. Definitely check out her new book. It's great information. She's a wealth of knowledge. Stay tuned for more great information and entertainment coming up here on TNCRadio.live. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live, on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast of the Truckers Network radio show.